Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dive deep into the power of silence. We're going to explore what happens in our relationships, our society, and even inside our own brains when all the communication just stops. I mean, think about it. Silence is never just silence, right? It can be a weapon, a shield, a cry for help, or even a path to figuring things out for yourself. It's this empty space that we almost always fill up with our own anxieties and assumptions. So what's really going on? So we're going to tackle this from two completely different angles. On one hand, yeah, silence can be a deliberate, calculated tool someone uses to get control in a relationship. But on the other hand, it can be a sign of some really deep internal distress, a retreat from a world that just feels like too much. Okay, first up, let's get into how silence can be used as a straight-up tactic. You've probably heard of the no contact rule, especially after a breakup. Well, it's not just about getting some space. It's actually a strategy, and it's rooted in a really powerful psychological principle. This, right here, is the key. By suddenly cutting off all communication, you're making yourself scarce. And the theory goes that this sudden absence makes the other person start to value you more. It's a way to shift the power dynamic by showing them, hey, my presence isn't something you can just take for granted. And this is where it gets really fascinating. These steps are designed to get a very specific emotional reaction. First, the confusion completely messes with their expectations. Then, the total lack of information starts to build this sense of mystery. And that often triggers a real fear of losing you for good, which can force them to stop and reevaluate how they treated you and what you actually meant to them. You know, this isn't some new idea. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius said it perfectly centuries ago. When someone's silence makes you feel anxious, confused, or angry, you're basically handing them the keys to your emotions. The whole goal of a tactic like this is to knock you off balance. And if you react emotionally, well, you're playing right into their hands. Okay, but here's the thing, and this is so important. Not all silence is a power play. What if it's not a strategy at all, but a symptom? A lot of the time, silence has nothing to do with the other person and everything to do with what's going on inside someone's own head. So now we're shifting gears. This section is all about the really personal and often painful reasons someone might just stop talking. We're talking about social withdrawal, not as an attack on someone else, but as a way to protect yourself. And when you look at the reasons why, it just makes so much sense. For a lot of people, silence is a shield. When you're overwhelmed by depression or social anxiety, just the act of talking can feel totally exhausting. Feelings of shame or betrayal can absolutely crush your self-esteem and make it feel safer to just pull away. It's not meant to be malicious, it's a coping mechanism against intense feelings of loneliness and worthlessness. But, and this is a big but, not all withdrawal is a bad thing. In the incredibly loud world we live in, sometimes choosing silence can be a really healthy move, especially if you're trying to escape a toxic environment. It can be a way to lower your stress, process your thoughts, and actually hear yourself think for a change. Okay, so we've looked at silence as a strategy and as a symptom, but how does it actually land? Let's talk about how the person on the receiving end interprets it, because that's often a totally different story. And this is the tricky part, right? Because regardless of the real reason, the person being ignored is left scrambling for an answer. They might think it's some kind of test to see how they'll react, or just a blatant grab for control. Or they might just assume the other person is hiding from something they did wrong. A lot of the time, it's just seen as a sign of emotional immaturity, that they just can't handle a tough conversation. All right, let's zoom way out for a second. What happens when it's not just two people, but whole groups in our society that stop talking to each other? This trend of just shutting down communication with anyone who disagrees with us, well, it has some pretty massive consequences. I mean, you see this stuff all over social media, right? This is from a real post, and it perfectly captures this troubling dynamic. Instead of talking through different points of view, the immediate reaction is just sever the connection. We're building walls instead of bridges. And the thing is, this does so much more than just end a debate. It actively fuels polarization. When we refuse to engage, the fear of the other side just grows and grows. We stop learning, we stop growing, and our society just gets more and more fractured. And that brings us to the most extreme end of the spectrum. What actually happens to our brains when they're forced into prolonged silence and isolation? The science here is both fascinating and, honestly, pretty terrifying. Think about this number, 22 hours. That's how long tens of thousands of inmates in the US spend in solitary confinement every single day. This isn't just quiet time, it's a profound, deep deprivation of human contact. And the physical damage to the brain is, well, it's shocking. Without social interaction, the brain's fear and stress center, the limbic system, goes into overdrive. At the very same time, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning and self-control, can actually shrink. The result? Impaired memory, poor focus, a major cognitive decline, and sometimes even increased paranoia. So this brings us full circle. We started this whole conversation with silence as a relationship tactic, and we end here with prolonged, forced silence being officially recognized by international bodies as a form of torture. It just shows how absolutely essential social contact is to our mental and our neurological health. So what is silence? A choice? A symptom? Or a prison? Well, as we've seen, it can be all three. It can be a calculated choice for control, a symptom of deep emotional pain, or, in its most extreme form, a literal prison for the mind. And figuring out the difference is absolutely vital for our relationships, for our society, and ultimately for our own well-being.